electric types are by far the coolest type in the Pokemon games. But will they be able to hold their own in a hardcore Nuzlocke on Pokemon Platinum? With some formidable foes along the way, one more particular than others, this should be quite the grind to say the least. And to start this grind, I head over to Route 202 where I can catch myself my first encounter, a Shinx. Now I got a lot of yapping I gotta do real quick, so bear with me. Fortunately and unfortunately, Shinx is our only encounter we can catch until after the first gym. Now you may be asking yourself, Yurd, how are you going to beat Rourke with a level capped Shinx? And honestly, it took a load of work. First and foremost, we need a Shinx with an impish nature, which is plus defense minus special attack with at least a defense IV of 20 off the rip. We then, and can only then, teach Shinx the move return, and at max friendship, this move can be 102 base attack. But it is still resisted by Rourke's team and isn't even a stab move. Now the competitive players are probably looking up the base stats right now and are seeing that Shinx's base stat is definitely lower than Craniodos's. This may be true, but if we grind up against Starlies for speed EVs, we might just have a chance to outspeed. That's if we get to Craniodos. And with all of that grinding out of the way, investing as much EVs into my defense and speed as possible, it is time to fight Rourke, the Rock Gym leader. He sends out Geodude as I lead with Shinx, and on the first couple of turns we are both trading with a fury of leers and rock throws. I am now down to half, so I leer him one more time as we get pelled to the yellow with one more rock throw. It's our time to strike, and we hit him to half with a return and then get absolutely bodied by a rock throw. This obviously took more than one attempt, 43 to be exact. I started this run in December of last year and it was a struggle. I did everything I could trying to get a perfect Shinx, teaching it return, running around for max friendship over and over and over. Yeah, this one clearly took a toll on my mental health. The difficulty is then ramped up because we can't get a single held berry till Floroma Town. Or is there? You see, I did a not so legitimate thing by catching a Machop and then trading it to this little girl for her Abra that is in fact holding an Orange Berry. This will give us a little bit more gusto going into the 43rd attempt, but now I also have more of an understanding of how Rourke's team works. With all of that preparation underway, it is time to battle Rourke once again, and he sends out Geodude as I lead with Shinx. Get out there, little bro. Now this Shinx has Intimidate that lowers a Pokemon's attack stat upon entry. So if you have a second Pokemon in your party, Rourke is more inclined to use Stealth Rock. I definitely cannot attack with Bidoof, so I switch back in Shinx to get off another Intimidate, but Geodude misses his Rock Throw on the way in. This is exactly what we want, so we can get off as many Leers as we can without breaking our Orange Berry. The Leers that we are racking up are giving us some good momentum, and Geodude hasn't even brought us to half yet either with Rock Throw. We launch our first return, and it looks like it's going to be a 3-hit KO. But y'all, fortunately RNG Jesus was shining down on us as we crit the Geodude with a fatal blow from return. Now up next is Onix, and we deploy the same strategy by sending in Bidoof that dodges a rock throw, and then we switch back in Soda for the Intimidate. Between the attack drop from Intimidate and Onix's awful attack, Onix can't really do anything other than bank on a crit. This will give me the defense that I need to leer him exactly 3 times in order to do damage. We then hit our return, and thank God it looks like it's going to be a 3-hit as Onix hits us with another rock throw. We then get a high roll to hit Onix to the red as he hits us to 10 HP with another rock throw. Now Rourke does potion here, but this goes in our favor because we can knock out the Onix with 2 consecutive rock throws thanks to us outspeeding. At 10 HP, we are on the wire as Rourke sends in his last Pokemon, Craniodos. Now this is where my speed EVs came in clutch because we can outspeed doing massive damage with Spark. Not only doing massive damage, but we can also get the paralysis. But Craniodos does break through the paralysis, hitting us with a pursuit, ending our... That's right, Soda survives the pursuit on 1 HP and delivers the final blow with Spark to finally give us our first gym badge of the run. Oh my god. I was unbelievably ecstatic. This run is possible, and it took a minor bit of mental insanity and loads of time out of my day, but we did it.
What do we do now? What do you mean? Now we can finally play the game. Oh yeah.
Since Shinx got that level up during the battle, it is time for him to evolve into a beastly Luxio. We then spin back to Jubilife City and we run into Team Galactic, and this man Professor Rowan is going in on them. He just hit them with the 5-step process on how to be a decent human being. We then traverse through Floroma Town to get to the Valley Windworks to finally catch ourselves our second encounter, a Pachirisu. Now, Pachirisu in this generation is nothing to write home about, but I am certainly happy to have an extra body on the team. I name him Lemonade, and after grinding levels against Team Galactic, it is now time to battle one of the heads, Mars. She sends out Zubat as I lead with Lemonade, and since Lemonade is a speed demon, we can just go ahead and KO with a single spark. Perugly is up next, and after getting hit with a crit with Fake Out, that left me feeling not too good, so I switch into Soda to get off an Intimidate and to tank the Scratch. After that, it was a slugfest of us trading Scratches and Sparks, but in the end, Soda just walled the crap out of him, leading us to a smoothish victory. We then hit up the Eterna Forest to find Cheryl to give her a ride all the way to Eterna City. When we get here, we immediately head over to the gym and start grinding levels for Gardenia. Now, fortunately with Gardenia, we don't have to rely so much on luck. We can just pull together a plan that will set us up for victory. She starts the battle by sending out her Turtwig as I lead with Lemonade. We start the battle by using a charm, lowering Turtwig's attack stat by 2 stages as it sets up with a Reflect. We then get off another one to bring it to -4, and now Razor Leaf isn't doing a thing. Since he is at -6, I switch into Soda to tank another Razor Leaf, and now it is time to activate the plan. We start loading up on charges to boost our special defense, but Turtwig is using Grass Knot now, which is doing a bit more damage than Razor Leaf. The plan is basically to get to +6 special defense with charge to ensure us that we can tank Roserade's hits. Not only that, I want to make sure that Reflect isn't up by the time it comes out. Since we are at +6 special defense, we are now able to knock out the Turtwig with 2 consecutive returns. Up next is our Cherrim, and we end up slamming it to half with a return as she just goes for a safeguard. Not really worried about that, I use another one and it ends up surviving on like 1 HP and then hits us with a magical leaf, but we get some recovery back from our Oran Berry. Gardenia then uses a super potion, so all we need to do is just spam return twice to end up giving us the KO. Her last Pokemon is Roserade, and with her bringing us to 14 HP in the red, which was really close for comfort, but we end up taking home the win with 1 more return. This indeed will give us our second gym badge of the run. Now, after obtaining our second gym badge, we can head over to the old chateau. In the chateau, if we thump this TV at night, we can net ourselves the great and powerful Rotom. Did I say great and powerful? Because that lonely nature is leading me to believe something different. Now, the one beautiful thing about him is that he does have the Levitate ability, which will make him the only encounter we can get to resist our arch nemesis, the ground type. We then take over the entire Galactic hideout, and the only person standing in the way of me and my bicycle is Jupiter, the Galactic head. She sends out her Zubat, and it immediately gets smoked by a single spark. Now, Zubat wasn't what I was fearing going into this battle. It was her Skunk Tank with high critical hit Night Slash. It ends up going for a smoke screen that was completely ignored as Soda hits him to over half with the spark. Skunk Tank then hits its Night Slash, but it doesn't even get a crit, but the funny thing is that we get a crit on our spark just taking it out. Let's get it, give me my bicycle, old man. Reunited once again, you beautiful piece of machinery. We then go and pick up the Explorer Kit that is going to give us some crucial items later on. We then make it to Hearthome City, which is the home of our next encounter in Eevee. Now, we obviously don't have a Thunderstone, and I really don't think we need Jolteon for the next gym, so he's just going to stay in the back of the party. And he also has a lonely nature. Now, Fantina's ghost team is pretty stacked, mainly her Miss Magius with Shadow Ball and her Duskull with Will-O-Wisp, so let's just see how this pans out. She sends out her Duskull as I lead with Lemonade, and immediately we switch into Root Beer as Duskull sets up a Future Sight. Duskull then hits a Shadow Sneak as we set up with a Confused Ray, so maybe we can get some confusion luck. Now, I know what y'all are thinking, and trust me, I really didn't have a better plan. We gotta do evasion strats, and these can be very risky since the Pokemon we are currently using is weak to Ghost, but eventually we get to +5 evasion and we can take out the Duskull with 2 consecutive shockwaves. This will now lead in Fantina's big and bad Miss Magius, and it misses a Shadow Ball as we end up hitting a Confused Ray. It fortunately misses a Shadow Ball, and after seeing the damage of the shockwave we just used, this plan is looking very risky. I then switch into Soda that tanks the Shadow Ball to half and unfortunately it gets the special defense drop. I can't switch, I need damage on this thing, and fortunately Miss Maggie stays confused as we unleash a powerful bite to the red as it recovers some of its health with a citrus berry. Still feeling like we have a fight in this, I switch and eliminate as Miss Maggie stays confused again. Fantina then reverses all of our hard work with the super potion as we are doing pitiful damage with Spark. This then leads Lemonade to get hit with a critical hit Shadow Ball, and now I am banking on a miracle to happen. We do hit our Spark and it wasn't enough to KO, but we paralyzed Miss Magius and it stays paralyzed. Holy shit. This means that we can outspeed and KO that thing, but my team has taken a lot of damage up until this point, and she has one more Pokemon in her arsenal, Haunter. Knowing I outspeed, I hit it to half with a Spark, and it hits its Shadow Claw, but we survive on 9 HP and can take home the win with one more Spark. The fact that we got through that Deathless was completely undeserved, but we made it through for our 3rd gym badge of the run. We now have the Berry Battle to take on, but half of his team is currently very frail to ours, other than Grottle obviously, that posed somewhat of a threat, but it ended up being a cakewalk for sure. After defeating him, this will grant us access to the Salacion Ruins. In here we can find a huge pickup in the Thunderstone, and this will immediately let us evolve our beloved Eevee into a Jolteon. We then make it to Veilstone City where we immediately start our gambling addiction, but this is completely necessary for the items that we can pick up. The first one we obtain is definitely getting the Thunderbolt TM that we immediately slap onto Jolteon. And I'm not even lying when I say that Jolteon just steamrolls his way through all of the trainers in the gym. That is the power of this speed demon. While we were also grinding to the level cap, our amazing starter evolves into its final form, Luxray. This will now lead us to Maylene and her fighting types. She sends out Meditite as I lead with Luxray with Intimidate, and since we lowered the attack stat of that thing, Fake Out is not doing a whole lot of damage. I then go ahead and outspeed on the next turn with the Spark to end up one-hit KOing him right off the rip. Up next is Lucario that outspeeds with a Drain Punch as we do over half with the Spark. Now he does get back to above half with another Drain Punch, but a critical hit Spark ends up doing him in. Her final Pokemon is Machoke, and playing it safe I switch into Rotom that has to tank a Rock Tomb on the switch. All this Machoke can really hit us with this Rock Tomb, so I use a Confuse Ray that ends up working its magic, leaving the Machoke confused. I follow it up with a Shockwave that brings him to a quarter as he hits a critical hit Rock Tomb, leaving me at very low HP. Being at -2 speed, I switch into Jolteon that gets in on a free switch and then takes home the win with one more Thunderbolt. This will then grant us access to Bastoria City, and before challenging the rival fight, we have an option to go pick up a new encounter. If we run around the grass in the Trophy Garden, we can pick ourselves up a Pichu. And after running around for hours and hours, we maxed out his friendship enough to evolve him into a Pikachu. And I already know what y'all are already saying. Why does bro need another pickup for the water gym? And you know what? Pikachu can learn Grass Knot, and that can help me with this Quagsire, and that's basically all I got. Now, I am not going to sugarcoat this battle. Wake was an absolute snooze fest, destroying his Gyarados with the Thunderbolt, and then critting his Quagsire with a Grass Knot. Like, come on, guys. The real threat was actually his Floatzel that gets paralyzed from a Thunder Wave, and then absolutely jump scares us with a Crunch to the red. But come on, guys, y'all know me. I just end up switching into our trusty Soda that can take home the win with one more Spark. Phew, that was rough. My dog, you did not need to do all that.
Can I interest you guys in a sweet treat?
Why are you running? Why are you running?
We then make it to Celestic Town where Team Galactic is taken over, and after dealing with the Grunt, we then have to battle Cyrus for the first time, but his team is completely cooked by Jolteon. After that, Cynthia's grandma gives us the HM for Surf, which means the world is in the palm of our hands with items. First off, we go back to Floroma Town where we can pick up the Electrizer and the Thunderbolt TM. Then we float on down to the Fuego Ironworks to pick up our next encounter, a Magnemite. We then grind him up to level 30 where he evolves into a Magneton. We can also train him up one level into Mount Coronet that evolves him into his final form, a Magnezone. Going up against Barry in this part of the game is rough, considering that his team has done a full 180 and is stacked with new evolutions, and he has a Torterra. He does start the battle with his Staraptor, but after getting hit with an Aerial Ace, we fry that bird like a Thanksgiving turkey. Up next is his Torterra, and we use Ominous Wind that actually gets the Omni boost as Torterra sets up a Leech Seed. I use Ominous Wind once more to bring him to over half, and because of that Omni boost, we can survive the super effective Bite and Leech Seed on 10 HP. Root Beer has done his surface, so I switch into Lemonade to tank the Razor Leaf to around half. We then use a Charm to lower Torterra's attack as it sets back up the Leech Seed. I then use a Super Fang to bring him to almost a quarter as he brings us to the red with a Razor Leaf Leech Seed combo. Slowly but surely we are making progress as I switch into Soda to get off and Intimidate, but Torterra gets a crit on its next Razor Leaf. But y'all know Soda isn't going to let that slide and delivers a powerful return crit of its own to finally KO Torterra. Up next is Rapidash, so I stay in and use a Spark to bring it to below half as we paralyze it as well, and it hits a very weak takedown. Rapidash has pretty much sealed his fate, looking into the eyes of one more Spark. This will next send in his Bruiser, Heracross. Now up until this point, my team has taken a lot of damage, and I might have 3 Mons left, but they are all physically weak. I just send in Jolteon that tanks a Brick Break on exactly half. Now I use a Growl to lower its attack, and thank God we survived the next Brick Break on 12 HP. I then switch into Daiquiri, and we tank the Night Slash to half, and because of my static ability, Heracross is now paralyzed. Seeing that we are halfway back into this fight, I use Nasty Plot as Heracross stays paralyzed, so one final Thunderbolt is able to take him out. His last Pokemon is Floatzel, but that was an easy click on Thunderbolt to give us the dub over the Berry battle. We now have to prepare ourselves for our next endeavor, the Canalave City Gym, which are predominantly Steel and Ground type Pokemon. The first thing we do is go into the underground in search of a Thunderstone. You are not able to obtain a second Thunderstone until the 8th gym badge unless you use this method. We need that Thunderstone because we need to teach Pikachu the move Focus Blast. As much as they ride Pikachu in the franchise, I'm surprised you can't automatically just teach him this move, but since we found a Thunderstone down in the underground, we can evolve him into a beastly Raichu. And after teaching Raichu this move and putting the wide lens on him, he absolutely slaughters Byron's gym, getting off a Nasty Plot and then just taking out everything in sight with Focus Blast and Grass Knot. I really can't believe out of all the gyms that we just battled, Byron's was by far the easiest. Now after the gym, we have to go around and beat all the Team Galactic heads in order to make our track to Snow Point City. And you know, what is their deal with blowing up stuff? Like, do you know how many Magikarp's lives have been taken at this point? I'm on top of the world. You'll never know what this feels like, Yurd. Shut up, Barry. Imagine getting cooked by Rourke over 40 times. Aye, bro. Now, before challenging Candace, I head back over to Celestic Town to come grab some special items. And if you talk to this man early in the morning, he will give you a choice specs. After slapping these fresh shades on Magnezone, he will turn this battle into an absolute bloodbath. Just by spamming Flash Cannon, we can decimate every single opponent on the field. This will in turn give us the second easiest gym badge we have received in this run. We then make it back to Veilstone City and snake our way through the Galactic headquarters. While we were doing that, we ended up finding the whole Galactic group in one room waiting for a speech. My minions, we have effortlessly done it. We have eradicated half the Magikarp species. No one will ever have to endure the pain of being splashed ever again. Is this a good time to start a love challenge? Looker, I love you, dog, but place and time, man. So you've come. You heard my speech, I take it. Yeah, I did, and what is this stemming from? Did you get splashed too hard as a kid? Now, Cyrus's team at this point is just ice and flying types, and they were all easily handled by switching between Spritz and Ginger Ale to give us a very smooth dub. The real challenge actually starts when we start battling Mars and Jupiter at the top of Mount Coronet. They send out double Bronzor as we lead with Ginger Ale and Munchlax. On the first turn, we outspeed with a Thunderbolt to bring Bronzor to a quarter as they set up Reflect and Confuse Ray on Ginger Ale while Munchlax is stockpiling. We fortunately end up breaking out of Confusion to take out the left Bronzor as the living one just attacks Munchlax with an extra sensory. This will now send in their biggest threat, Skunk Tank. We end up staying confused, and then Skunk Tank hits a mean poison jab on Ginger Ale. This is not good, but also what is worse is that Bronzor ends up using a light screen and Munchlax keeps stockpiling. Like, bro, chill. I just sent in Soda with Intimidate, and then we immediately get hit with a poison jab that actually poisons us. Bronzor then hits a Confuse Ray on Munchlax, and bro stays confused. We have to start chipping away at the Skunk Tank, so I use a Sparkle on it for not much damage as it hits a Flamethrower, bringing us to half. Bronzor then hits a very weak extra sensory as Munchlax stays confused. I then just switch into Raichu as both Skunk Tank and Bronzor just focus on Munchlax. I then use a Wide Lens Focus Blast that misses, and then we get hit with an extra sensory for not much. We do, however, hit the next one, bringing Skunk Tank deep into the yellow as we get hit to half with a Poison Jab. Bronzor, of course, sets back up the light screen as Munchlax uses Swallow. Bro, are you going to do anything this battle? I need to switch, so I get Spritz out there while Skunk Tank and Bronzor are both target Munchlax once more. Skunk Tank finally KOs Munchlax as we set up a Reflect, and this will next send in Barry's Staraptor. Staraptor fortunately takes out the Skunk Tank with a crit takedown as we use a resisted Flash Cannon on the Bronzor. This will leave Bronzor using a Confuse Ray on Staraptor as Jupiter next sends in her Golbat. Staraptor uses a takedown, bringing Golbat to below half as Golbat uses a Mean Look. I really wanted to get everything off the field, so I used a Discharge, KOing the Golbat and Staraptor as Bronzor survives using a Confuse Ray. This will next send in the Rapidash that can finally KO Bronzor with one final Fire Blast. This will next send in their Perugly, and we immediately get put to sleep with a Hypnosis, but Rapidash lands a Will-O-Wisp. Ideally, this is best case scenario because we can switch into Rotom to basically wall the Perugly into oblivion. Their last Pokemon is a Golbat that gets immediately KO'd by a final Shockwave Fire Blast combo. Now, Cyrus's team has done a full 180, but half of his team is weak to Electric, so let's see how this pans out. He sends out his Houndoom as I lead with Daiquiri, and we both end up going for a Focus Blast Will-O-Wisp, but we both end up missing. The next one does hit, bringing Houndoom to a sliver in the red as it does burn us with Will-O-Wisp. Knowing Cyrus is going for a full restore, I take the turn to Nasty Plot so we can confirm the KO with one more Focus Blast. His next Pokemon is a Gyarados that gets immediately outsped and KO'd with one Thunderbolt. Next up is his Weavile, and I don't think Daiquiri will outspeed, so playing it safe, I switch into Soda to Intimidate and tank the Night Slash. Weavile then uses an Ice Punch to bring us to half as we bring it to the exact same range with a Spark. We then keep trading, Ice Punch for Spark, but eventually we get brought to a range where it feels risky staying in. But switching Jolteon in to tank this Ice Punch was honestly a solid move. You see, I slapped the specs onto Jolteon so we can not only destroy the Weavile, but we can destroy the rest of his team with a bunch of choice specs boosted Thunderbolts. We actually do take on Giratina here, but when you have a Magnezone on your team, you can just wall the crap out of this thing to death. This finally means that we can access Route 222 to find our best and final encounter in Electabuzz that I just used my Master Ball on. If we use the Electrizer that we found near the Fuego Ironworks, we can trade him and he will evolve into a monstrous Electivire. Now, the one beautiful thing about Electivire is that he can learn a ton of coverage TMs like Earthquake and all the elemental punches. This will definitely help us going against the final gym leader, Volkner, because when I slapped the Soft Sand on Electivire, his whole team didn't stand a chance against the Giga Chad Electric type I brought to the table. I mean, honestly, it's not rocket science to beat Volkner. Do you have a Pokemon that can use Earthquake? Good, just spam that and Gym Badge earned. This will now lead us to our final stride through Victory Road, and after making it all the way through, we start our preparations for taking on the Elite Four. This is it, baby, our final team that will hopefully take us to the finish line. We have Ginger Ale with Shadow Ball, Thunderbolt, Protect, and Toxic. Spritz with Reflect, Magnet Rise, Discharge, and Flash Cannon. Daiquiri with Thunderbolt, Focus Blast, Grass Knot, and Nasty Plot. Root Beer with Discharge, Confuse Ray, Substitute, and Ominous Wind. Our starter, Soda with Spark, Return, Crunch, and Protect. And last but not least, we have Coffee with Fire Punch, Brick Break, Ice Punch, and Earthquake. Now before we handle anything Elite Four wise, we have one final fight that we have to take on with our rival, Simp. He sends out Staraptors, I lead with Ginger Ale, and one Choice Specs Thunderbolt later, we have the KO. Up next is his Torterra, a huge threat, so I switch into Rotom that can dodge his Earthquake with the Levitate ability. We then use a Confuse Ray that actually proves effective as he stays confused. We then use an Ominous Wind that doesn't do a whole lot, but Torterra just reverses it using Synthesis. I go ahead and try to set up with a Substitute, but it gets immediately broken by a Leaf Storm. I just use Ominous Wind that gets a terrible roll as we tank a Crunch on 44 HP. Knowing Torterra can't use Earthquake, I switch into Coffee to tank a Crunch and then finally KO that thing with a 4x super effective Ice Punch. Next up in his arsenal is Snorlax that actually does survive the incoming Brick Break on a quarter and then fires back with a super effective Earthquake that Coffee does survive on 8 HP. This means that we can outspeed taking him out with one more Brick Break, sending in his next Pokemon, Heracross. I wouldn't stay in if money was on the line, so I switch into Soda to intimidate and tank a very weak Aerial Ace. I am very much not threatened by anything this Heracross can do to us, so 2 sparks later, we have the KO. His second to last mon is Floatzel that tries to fish for a KO with Crunch, but 1 spark was able to take him out as well. His last Pokemon is Rapidash, and after it uses Sunny Day, we can knock it to a quarter with a spark. It then goes for a Will-O-Wisp that does hit and allows it to survive on like 1 HP from our incoming Crunch. I then switch into Raichu to tank the sun-boosted Fire Blast and then outspeed on the next turn to take him out with a Thunderbolt. Our first real challenge in the Elite Four is Aaron and his bug types. He sends out his Yanmega as I lead with Ginger Ale. I really don't want him to speed boost us into oblivion, so 1 Specs Thunderbolt does the job. He next sends out Heracross, and since Ginger Ale is at full HP, I just use a Thunderbolt that brings him to a quarter as he hits a very powerful close combat to the red. Fortunately for me though, I outspeed, so 1 more Thunderbolt KOs, sending in his Vespiquen. I switch into Coffee to tank the attack order, and then I fire off an Ice Punch that brings it to the red as it uses Defend Order. Thanks for using that full restore, I like that out of you, because 2 final Ice Punches KO that thing immediately. Next up is Scissor, but we had a 4x super effective Fire Punch waiting for him to KO. His last Pokemon is Drapion that does survive the super effective Earthquake and hits us with a Cross Poison. But since that move is a contact move, we paralyze it with Static, so 1 final Earthquake gives us the dub over Aaron. Up next is Bertha, a battle I have been dreading, but I have a plan for her. She sends out Whiscash as I lead with Raichu, and we do get off a Nasty Plot on the first turn as Whiscash hits us deep into the red with an Earth Power, but our Citrus Berry helps us out a bit. Now I kept Grass Knot on Raichu for this very reason, since Grass Knot's power really stems from the weight of the Pokemon, and all of Bertha's Mons are basically obese, we can take out almost every member on her team but 1. That would be her Gliscor, and not wanting to tank an Earthquake, I switch into Rotom that just has to tank a Fire Fang instead. Fire Fang then brings us to half as we set up with a Confuse Ray, and now that we for sure know it can't use Earthquake, I switch into Coffee to deliver the final fatal blow from an Ice Punch. Up next is Flint, the fire expert, but we did him just as dirty as we did Faulkner. By slapping the soft sand on Coffee, we can just steamroll his whole team with a soft sand boosted Earthquake for an easy dub. I can definitely see why they are best friends in the anime because they both share the same trauma from Earthquake. Up next is Lucian, the psychic expert, and he sends out Mr. Mime as I lead with Ginger Ale. On the first turn, we send off a Spec Shadow Ball that brings him deep into the red as he gets off a Reflect. This does matter in a way because after we do KO him with another Shadow Ball, he sends out his Steel Wall Bronzor. I use another Shadow Ball to bring him to a quarter as he sets up with a Calm Mind. This is not good. Thank God we have a maxed out EV Impish Nature Luxray with Intimidate that can easily tank one of the Earthquakes to above half. We then use a Crunch that does surprisingly very little damage as it uses a Psychic that nukes us to a quarter. I definitely need to get Soda out of there, so I switch Spritz into a very resistant Psychic. I end up outspeeding, so I set up Reflect as Bronzong hits us to half with an Earthquake. I then use Magnet Rise so we can't use Earthquake anymore, and then we slug it out with Discharge and Psychic, but Spritz proves why he is the better Steel type in this battle. Up next is his Gallade, so I switch into Rotom that isn't affected by the incoming Drain Punch. I then use a Confuse Ray, but it proves non-effective as Gallade breaks out and hits us with a Psycho Cut. We just start going back and forth, Ominous Wind and Psycho Cut, but since these are very high crit moves and I'm brought down to the range that I am, I definitely need to switch out. I then switch into Coffee into a very powerful Leaf Blade, and since we paralyzed it with Static, we can KO it on the next turn with an Earthquake. Up next is his Speedy Alakazam, and risking it for the biscuit, I stay in and tank a large amount of damage from Psychic, but since we did survive, we can take him out with a crit Earthquake as well. This just leaves his final Pokemon, Espeon. I need to switch out, so I get out Daiquiri as Espeon uses a quick attack, but it gets paralyzed, but so do we, because Espeon's ability is Synchronize. However, we do get off a Nasty Plot as Espeon stays paralyzed, and for whatever reason, I use Focus Blast that brings Espeon to half. Espeon then uses a Psychic that brings me deep into the red as I send in my last full health Mon, Jolteon. Jolteon fortunately only has to tank one quick attack as he proves why he is the best evolution, destroying Espeon with one final Shadow Ball. Well, we did it. We surpassed the Elite Four and we did it deathless. We have one final battle we need to take on before we can take home all the gold. Our trials and tribulations have led us to this moment, so let us do battle with the champion, Cynthia. She sends out Spiritomb as I lead with Spritz. Now Spiritomb is basically walled by Spritz, so I go ahead and set up Light Screen and Reflect as it hits me with Shadow Ball and Dark Pulse, which are both resistant. We use a Discharge to bring it to around half, but a critical hit Discharge on the next turn was certainly appreciated. She next sends in her Garchomp, and knowing we have an Earthquake in our future, I make the switch into Rotom so it doesn't affect us. I then send in Coffee to tank the Dragon Rush on the switch, but our Static ability comes in clutch, paralyzing Garchomp. This means that a Never Melt Ice boosted Ice Punch is definitely enough to KO that monster. Up next is Lucario that we can easily outspeed and KO with an Earthquake. Up next is our bulky Togekiss, so I switch into Jolteon with the Specs to tank an Aura Spear to half. We then hit a Choice Specs Thunderbolt that nearly gets the KO over Togekiss as it retaliates with an Aura Spear, bringing us to a quarter. Cynthia does use her full restore though, so we can use two Choice Specs Thunderbolts to KO Togekiss. Cynthia then sends out her second to last Mon, Milotic, and wanting to conserve Ginger Ale, I switch into Soda to tank the incoming Surf. Milotic of course outspeeds, bringing us deep into the red with another Surf as we counter with a Spark, bringing it to a quarter. Knowing Soda fought the good fight, I switch into Raichu that tanks the Dragon Pulse on the switch and then is able to KO Milotic with one more Thunderbolt. This just leaves us with our final Pokemon, Roserade. I just go ahead and I switch out Spritz to tank two Energy Balls as we set up a Light Screen boosting our team's special defense. We do this so our Knight in Shining Armor Coffee can tank one Energy Ball on the switch and then absolutely take us all the way with one final Never Melt Ice boosted Ice Punch. Well, we did it, y'all. It was definitely rough in the beginning, but Electro types sure can hold their own. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, and if you want to see more painful content like this, drop a sub. Until then, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in my next run.